to start campaigning against climate change and to start campaigning for projects that are to for example, clean the place around and start thinking about solutions. And this is very important because it's also very connected to empowerment. It's also very connected to some of the testimonies that we have picked up from our grantee partners in the ground, who are people with disabilities whose lives have been transformed because of this.
So does your organization provide many grants to nonprofits, projects, and entrepreneurial pursuits spearheaded by people with disabilities at all?
Yes, thank you, Ming. It's actually, so Global Greengrants Fund has existed for 30 years. Through our network of advisors who are environmental activists, who know and work with social movements in different regions in the world, and recognize and identify many of the groups that we support. We started to have a conversation with the Ford Foundation because we started to gain an interest in the connection between disability rights and environmental justice. And we started to identify something which is very important for us to recognize and say it in a transparent way. Because we work with the environmental justice movements, we, throughout these years, we had not recognized that we were not really being able to we were not supporting disability rights groups before, and we had to intentionally embark on this journey, which has been amazing, on learning first internally what is the connection and what is the type of work, and how can we start identifying organizations and groups working with persons or led by persons with disabilities, to be able to start recognizing and creating a roadmap to start supporting more and more these type of groups. The environmental justice movement has historically ignored and not included people with disabilities. And this is because of the system of ableism and discrimination against people with disabilities that have not been trusted to have a voice, that have not been included in tables where we discuss climate change around the world, for example. One of the things that we started identifying more and more is that obviously there's very unique and particular affectations of climate disasters, for example, with people with disabilities. And that is very much connected, not only because they are the ones who suffer the most, but because they are also the ones and their groups who are leading solutions creatively with climate adaptation, for example, and climate resilience. So we need that brain power to be articulated with the whole climate justice movement in the world. So because of that, we started identifying more and more groups. And up to now, we have supported more than 40 groups led by these people with disabilities in the intersection with climate justice.
That was very well said. So 2 follow-ups from what you just said. You said, people with disabilities are some of the most affected by climate change, why you believe that. And then two, you said there are Global Greengrants Fund have funded around 40 projects. Just telling us, not in detail with going through each one, but like generally, what are the projects concerning the scope of it?
Sure. So it has been documented, for example, that with the disasters, natural disasters, and with the climate crisis unfolding, there's going to be more and more disasters. People with disabilities are the ones who suffer the most, because the system has been the system of exclusion that we have for people with disabilities make them more vulnerable whenever a disaster happens. This is because for any type of disasters, whenever there's going to be an earthquake or the announcement of a disaster from the government, the systems are not really are not adapted to people who maybe cannot hear a siren, for example. Also, the people who live in wheelchairs have a lot of difficulties in moving away from their houses whenever there's a need to be somewhere else and to move away from your house upon an imminent disaster. One of the grantees that we support is a grantee from Nigeria. In the Evoca village of the Niger Delta, there's 2 methane gas flares that have been causing ear injuries and blindness and eye injuries to many children and many people from this village, for example, and this community. So this tells us something very important. The disaster zones or sacrifice zones, which are the places where the system and society have decided that, these places will just be affected by our economic activities, and it has been a decision, and we it's not a coincidence, obviously, that these sacrifice zones are zones with with people who have been marginalized. These are zones that are usually composed of people of color, indigenous people, and people who have been excluded naturally because of colonialism, because of racism, because of sexism. And these people then start suffering from physically from the consequences of living in a place like this. The grantee that we support there is encouraging people with disabilities to start campaigning against climate change and to start campaigning for projects that are to for example, clean the place around and start thinking about solutions. And this is very important because it's also very connected to empowerment. It's also very connected to some of the testimonies that we have picked up from our grantee partners in the ground, who are people with disabilities whose lives have been transformed because of this.